"I've been waiting," my husband said, in a voice I had never heard come out of him before. Not angry, not trembling, not bracing itself for an argument. Just final, the way a door closing for the last time is final. For the right moment. He opened the laptop. 11 people were standing in my living room, and nobody was breathing. My sister in the corner. 3 neighbors from the block. 2 of Marcus's school friends, their mothers holding paper plates with birthday napkins folded underneath their thumbs. Raymond's mother had driven all the way from Rockford for this, and she was standing very still near the bookshelf with her hand resting on the spine of a Bible she had given us years ago. The fan in the window was spinning. The summer heat pressed in around all of us. The cake, chocolate, 2 layers, 9 candles, was on the linoleum floor, spreading slowly in a bloom of frosting and yellow sponge. My son was 9 years old, and his face had crumpled the way only a child's face can crumple. Total, unguarded, the grief of someone who doesn't know yet how to hide what they feel. My daughter, Brianna, stood in the center of the room with her arms folded and her chin raised, ready to explain herself, to perform distress, to redirect every eye in the room toward her own suffering, the expression I had been reading on her face for 3 years. Raymond clicked play. "I need you to come back with me." Because you cannot understand what was on that screen without understanding what it cost me to be standing in that room, upright, in my cherry red housecoat, holding a lighter for 9 candles that would not get lit for another hour. You cannot understand what it means to survive something without understanding exactly what it was designed to destroy. If you know someone who is carrying something like this right now, share this story with them. The person who needs it most won't come looking on their own. So, let me take you back. Let me take you back to summer. I was 41 years old and standing in the checkout line at the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon in July, holding 2 bags of elbow macaroni and a block of sharp cheddar, when my knees went soft beneath me. Not dramatically. Nobody noticed. Just a quiet softening, the kind my body had been delivering for months as a polite suggestion that I had been filing under later. I gripped the cart handle, breathed through it, kept moving. Marcus was turning 9. He had asked, with the absolute gravity that 9-year-old boys reserve for things that genuinely matter to them, for macaroni and cheese baked golden on top. I was going to give him that. I was going to give him everything I had left. The south side of Chicago in summer is a specific physical experience. The heat hangs low between the brick faces of the buildings, the sidewalks push it back up, and the air between them does not move at all. Our neighborhood is built around a small-town main street, a hardware store, a barber shop, a pharmacy with a hand-lettered sign in the window, and a diner on the corner where the coffee is always fresh and the counter stools swivel loose, and the woman at the register has known my first name for longer than some of my friendships. It is the kind of neighborhood that looks like safety when you are driving through it. I had been telling myself it was safe from the inside for 3 years. I live in a small cottage a few blocks off the strip. White siding gone gray, paint peeling at the window trim in long, deliberate strips, a vegetable garden along the south fence that I planted the year Marcus was born. Tomatoes, peppers, a determined row of collard greens that returns whether I tend it properly or not. Inside, the cottage traps summer warmth like a clenched fist. You breathe it in all day and release it slowly through the night. The fan in the living room window runs from June to September, and you learn the whole texture of a day in the sound of it. The framed picture of Jesus in the hallway has been there since before I moved in. I kept it because his expression is not judgment. It looks, to me, like someone paying full, quiet attention. The rotary phone is mounted on the kitchen wall. Ivory, long cord, perfectly functional. And people laugh when they see it the first time. But there is something about the mechanical drag of a rotary dial, the satisfying weight of each number falling back into place, that makes a call feel like a decision. Like you chose to reach out to a person rather than just touching a surface. That summer, the phone rang most evenings with Brianna calling from wherever she had been during the day. Her voice sliding into the low, fatigued register she used for me. Not for others, I would eventually learn, just for me. I didn't know that yet. I stood in that grocery store checkout line with my macaroni and my sharp cheddar and a body sending up quiet flares that I had decided not to read. And I believed I was a woman who loved her family. I believed that love was its own form of protection. I was wrong about almost everything. But I was not wrong about Marcus, and I was not wrong that there was still something in me worth fighting for. I just hadn't found what fighting back looked like yet. The first time Brianna moved back home as an adult, she was 19 and going through something I could not name. That vagueness should have been a warning. Instead, I furnished a room for her, bought a new lamp for the nightstand because hers from childhood was broken, and told myself that a mother's job does not end at 18. It does not end. I had built my entire life on that belief. I believed in reciprocity, that love given at full measure comes back at full measure, that sacrifice is a kind of investment with guaranteed return, that if you pour yourself out completely for the people you belong to, they will catch you when you fall. That is the oldest lie there is, and I swallowed it whole for years. Not because I was foolish, because it is a beautiful idea, and beautiful ideas are the easiest ones to abuse. Brianna's list of diagnoses accumulated the way debt accumulates, gradually, then suddenly. Fibromyalgia first, then a possible autoimmune condition, then chronic fatigue. Then something involving her gut that required a specialized diet I learned to cook around. Every time I gently suggested a second opinion, she wept. Every time I raised the possibility that she might be well enough to attempt a part-time job, she deteriorated overnight. I did not have a name for what was happening. I had the bills, and I had the guilt, and I had the belief. You might be wondering right now how I didn't see it sooner. That is a fair question, and the answer is not simple. I did see things. I noticed that her worst symptoms arrived with remarkable timing, almost always just before something was expected of her, almost always just after I had mentioned something difficult we needed to discuss. I noticed that she recovered from setbacks with notable speed in moments she thought she was unobserved. I noticed the smirk, small, quick, gone before I could be certain I'd seen it. But every time I noticed something, she had an explanation. And every time she explained, she cried. And every time she cried, I felt the specific kind of shame that is reserved for mothers who doubt their children. That shame is a leash. She had trained herself to hold the end of it. I had spent 3 years of income and savings, $18,000, on medical expenses for my adult daughter. Prescriptions, specialist visits, emergency room co-pays, urgent care after hours, a sleep study that found nothing, a second sleep study I paid for because she said the first equipment was defective, $18,000. The word wealth was not something I had any relationship to at that point in my life, but $18,000 was what I had been quietly building for Marcus's education, and I had drained it, and then drained more. The things I sacrificed that were harder to quantify than dollars. I had not seen my own primary care doctor in 14 months because the appointments felt selfish. The tightness in my chest that had started in spring, I had filed it under stress and kept moving. I used to read romance novels borrowed from the library on the corner, 3 at a time, evenings in the living room while the fan spun. The women in those books always discovered their worth eventually, always had a moment where they stood in a room and knew, with complete certainty, that they were enough. I used to read those scenes and feel something complicated. I had stopped reading by March. Not because I decided to stop, because I simply no longer had the interior space for something that was only for me. I cooked the macaroni and cheese differently depending on who needed it. For Marcus, golden on top, always. For illness days, soft and mild. The way my own mother used to make it for me when I was a child sick with fever. I stood over that stove many evenings that summer and stirred and tasted and adjusted. And I fed a healthy woman food made for the sick, and I called it love. And the framed picture of Jesus in the hallway watched every pot I stirred without saying a word to me about what I was getting wrong. I want you to understand something because I think this matters. I was not a weak woman. I was a woman whose strength had been redirected. There is a critical difference between those two things. The same discipline that kept the house running and Marcus cared for and the bills somehow paid, that discipline was being funneled, Deliberately, by someone who understood exactly how to aim it. She did not create my capacity for sacrifice. She located it and pointed it at herself. The evening before Marcus's birthday, I was in the kitchen at 11 o'clock doing prep for the next day's macaroni. The rotary phone rang at 11:15. I picked up before the second ring because I always picked up before the second ring. Something was needed. I said yes. I wrote nothing down that night. But somewhere in the back of the part of me that had been paying quiet attention for months, something was beginning to form a question I did not yet know how to ask out loud. It would not stay quiet much longer. There is a specific kind of numb that settles when you have been running on empty long enough. You mistake it for peace. You think, I have gotten quiet. You think, I have found my equilibrium. What you have actually done is stopped registering signals because you cannot afford to respond to them. My chest had been tight since spring. I noticed it the way you notice a draft in a room. Present, uncomfortable, not enough to make you get up and find the source. I canceled my cardiology appointment twice that year. The first time because Brianna had a specialist visit the same week and I couldn't arrange coverage for Marcus. The second time because the copay felt irresponsible with the utility bill past due. I told myself it was stress. Stress is the explanation that costs nothing. I had been using it for years, and it had never once told me to stop. July 14th, a Wednesday, 2:47 in the afternoon. I had just pulled the macaroni from the oven, golden on top, exactly right, the edges pulling away from the pan the way they do when everything has gone perfectly. And I was carrying the dish toward the counter when my left arm went numb to the elbow. The pressure in my chest arrived at full force for the first time, no longer a draft, but a presence, sitting directly behind my sternum with an authority that would not negotiate. I set the dish down. I sat at the kitchen table. And then I was on the kitchen floor. And I did not remember the interval between the chair and the floor at all. The ambulance came. Marcus was at a neighbor's. My first clear thought, lying on the kitchen floor looking up at the light fixture. At least he won't have to see this. Not my own life. Not my own survival. Whether my son would have to witness it. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I know someone listening to this understands exactly what I mean when I say that even lying on a floor with your left arm numb and your chest in a vice, some of us are still putting ourselves last. That is what this kind of life does to a person. It rewires the reflex. In the hospital that evening, the cardiologist sat across from me with the careful expression of someone measuring how much truth to deliver at once. My heart had been struggling. The stress markers were significant. The months of ignored symptoms had accumulated into something that could no longer be unfiled for later. He was kind about it. Kindness felt strange to me. The specific kindness of someone whose concern for me had nothing to do with what I could provide. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, I could not lift my hands for a full hour. I want to be precise about what that was. It was not a medical symptom. What it was, my body, which had been doing everything I demanded of it for so long, holding everyone up, carrying everyone's weight, running on guilt and the belief that sacrifice would be returned, simply stopped. Not in collapse, in refusal. A full, quiet refusal to continue pretending any of this was sustainable, and in that stillness, the truth I had been keeping at arm's length for 3 years walked into the room and sat down beside me. $18,000. The smirk I had spent years convincing myself I imagined. The way she always called right when I was in the middle of something that was entirely mine. And then Brianna came. Once. She sat in the chair by the window, looked at her phone, and said in the voice of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow to understand, "Nobody actually asked you to do all this, Mom." 14 words. Casual cruelty in the mouth of someone who has never once gone without. I looked at her. And the shame leash, the one she had trained me to feel every time I doubted her, did not tighten. For the first time in years, I felt nothing from it, just a clear, cold clarity, like the moment after a window opens and the stale air in a room finally changes. When she left, I reached for the notepad I keep in my purse. I wrote down the date, the time, her exact words. And then I kept writing, 3 pages, in a hospital bed on the south side of Chicago, in handwriting that got steadier as I went. Dates, dollar amounts, patterns I had noticed and let go. I thought about the rotary phone on the kitchen wall. I thought about the way it rang in the evenings with her voice on the other end, and how that ring had gone from comfort to anticipation, to low-grade dread so gradually I had barely noticed the transformation. A thing that once meant home had slowly become a demand. I was done answering before the second ring. Something had shifted in me that was not going to shift back. The hospital has a family support group that meets on Thursday afternoons in a room on the 3rd floor with beige walls and folding chairs arranged in a circle and a coffee pot that runs from noon to 5. I found the flyer on a corkboard near the elevator on the 4th day of my stay, doing my first walk of the corridor while holding the IV pole with both hands and moving with the deliberate caution of someone who has recently been reminded that her body has terms she did not set. There were 7 of us in the circle that first Thursday. I was the youngest by a decade. A social worker named Patricia ran the group with the particular patience of someone who has listened to a great many painful things without flinching. Most of the others were managing aging parents, difficult adult children, spouses with long illnesses. The language in the room was careful and kind, and I sat in my folding chair for a full hour without saying a word. I was not ready to speak. I was still taking inventory. And then a woman across the circle said something that stopped every other sound in my head. She was around my age, maybe slightly older, with close-cropped natural hair and the posture of someone who had recently relearned how to hold herself upright. Something I recognized because I was doing the same thing, in that same room, in that same folding chair. She said, "My daughter had 6 different diagnoses over 4 years. Not one of them checked out when I finally took her records to a different physician. What she had was a mother who believed her. Do you understand what it means to hear your own story in someone else's mouth? It is not comforting exactly. It is more like being handed evidence, the world confirming that what you saw was real, that you were not imagining it, that the thing you kept explaining away was, in fact, exactly what it looked like." After the session, I found her by the coffee pot. She handed me a cup without being asked, which is what you do when you have learned to read another person's need accurately. Her name was Denise. She had grown up in Gary, Indiana, moved to Chicago in her 30s, and spent 4 years running what she now called, without a trace of bitterness, a solo support operation for a daughter who had been fully capable of supporting herself the entire time. She said, "The first thing they do is make you doubt what you saw. Then they make you doubt what you felt. Once you no longer trust yourself, they don't even have to try anymore." I had been doubting myself for 3 years. Doubt had been the primary interior weather of my life. Hearing those words was like watching a structure I had been living inside suddenly become visible from the outside. I could see its shape for the first time, and I could see the doors. Denise had extracted herself from her situation over the course of 18 months. She had consulted a family law attorney. She had rebuilt her finances into something that was entirely hers. She sat with me in the corridor outside the support room with a paper cup of institutional coffee, and she said, "You have more rights than you think. Start learning them." And she slid a business card across the table for an attorney in Hyde Park. I held that card for a long time after she left. There is a particular feeling that comes when someone who has walked through the fire you are currently standing in front of turns back and says, "It is survivable." It is more specific than hope. It is evidence that a path through exists, because someone else has taken it and arrived somewhere worth arriving. Back in my room that evening, Raymond came and sat beside the bed. He did not say much. He reached across and held my hand for a long time without speaking, and I felt the weight of another person's presence, not the weight of their need, but the weight of their genuine concern. Those are completely different textures. I had been so submerged in one that I had forgotten the other existed. He said quietly, "I've been paying attention." That was all. I did not ask him to explain. What I understood in that moment was this: I was not alone. I had not been seeing clearly. And those two things, taken together, meant I could begin. I came home from the hospital on a Monday morning in late July. The heat was identical to the day I had left. The same unmoving press of it against skin. The fans spinning in the living room. The collard greens pushing through the dry soil along the south fence. But something inside the cottage had a different quality. The way a room feels different when someone has rearranged the furniture while you were gone, and you can't immediately identify what changed. What had changed was me. I was careful about it. Deliberate and quiet. If you are in a situation like the one I was in, if you have recognized the pattern, made your decision, and are now preparing your next move, please hear this. Do not announce your clarity. Do not let the shift in your eyes arrive before the shift in your circumstances. A woman who has decided to fight is most powerful in the moments before the person she is fighting understands that she has decided anything at all. So I wore my cherry red housecoat. I cooked dinner. I answered Brianna's calls with the same available voice, the same rhythm of yes and I understand, and let me see what I can do. I maintained the surface. Inside, I was building a record. On a Thursday morning when both Marcus and Brianna were out of the house, I dressed, put on my shoes, and walked to the bank on the main strip, the one with the blue awning 2 blocks from the diner. I opened a savings account in only my name, just mine. No joint holder, no secondary access, no one else's signature required for anything. The account had $340 in it when I opened it. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. Not because it is dramatic, it isn't, but because I want you to understand what $340 represented to a 41-year-old woman who had spent 3 years watching her income and savings disappear into a performance of illness. That $340 was the first financial decision I had made purely for myself in longer than I could accurately account for. The account manager slid the form across the desk, and my hand was steady when I signed it. I walked out onto the sidewalk in the July heat and stood still for a moment. Mine. Only mine. That was its own kind of fortune. I called Denise from the front step of the bank. She laughed, warm, immediately recognizing, and said, "Now you've started something." She had become the kind of contact who answers quickly and asks the right questions. Not how are you, but how are you actually doing? Real questions, because she had been through enough to know the difference between the two. She sent me 2 things over the following weeks. An article about financial coercion within family structures, which gave precise clinical language to patterns I had been living through without a vocabulary for them, and the name of a therapist in Lincoln Park. I made an appointment. Raymond and I had the first real conversation we had managed in years. Real in the sense that we were both entirely present. Not managing each other, not working around the topic, not having a different conversation beneath the one we were speaking. He told me about the security cameras. Installed 8 months prior, common areas only, living room and kitchen. He had had a feeling he couldn't name, and he had decided to stop not acting on feelings he couldn't name. 27 clips. He had not told me because he had wanted more, enough that when the moment came, it would be irrefutable, a record so complete that no explanation could survive it. He asked if I was angry he had waited. I thought about it honestly. No, because he was right. If he had shown me 8 months ago, I would have found a way to explain it away. I would have turned it around, felt the shame leash tighten, protected her from the evidence of her own behavior. I was not ready 8 months ago. I was ready now. Between his footage and my notes, we were building something that would hold. Marcus's birthday was 3 weeks away. The fan was still spinning. The trap had not yet been set, but the materials were assembled. And in the quiet of those evenings, with the rotary phone finally silent, and the cottage breathing normally for the first time in years, Something careful and certain was taking shape between Raymond and me. A plan. A moment. A room full of witnesses. Planning is a strange occupation for a woman who has spent most of her adult life reacting. My entire experience of the previous 3 years had been reactive, responding to crises, adjusting schedules, reshaping our finances around another person's urgencies. I had reacted to every diagnosis, every setback, every call at 11 o'clock at night that began with a voice like exhaustion and ended with a transfer of dollars I did not have. Deciding felt almost foreign. I was learning. Raymond and I sat together at the kitchen table 2 weeks before Marcus's birthday with the laptop between us. He had organized the footage in 2 ways. Chronologically, and by contrast, clips of her demonstrating symptoms while believing herself observed, followed directly by clips of her in the following hour moving freely, speaking normally, carrying herself with the ease of someone in full health. The contrast was not subtle, it was total. I made myself watch each clip once, then look away, then come back. I was not going to flinch from this. I had flinched for 3 years, and it had cost me $18,000 and a cardiac event at my own kitchen table. 27 clips over 8 months. That is the kind of documentation that becomes irrefutable not through any single moment, but through accumulation. Because a pattern established across 27 points of evidence is no longer an interpretation. It is a record. We decided on Marcus's birthday for one specific reason. It was the moment Brianna would least expect to be watched carefully. She would be focused on the room's attention, on the way a celebration centers someone who was not her, on the particular threat she seemed to feel whenever the people she had worked to distance me from were physically present. Raymond believed she would do something. He did not know what exactly, but he understood her behavioral logic well enough to predict that she could not remain passive in a room full of witnesses paying attention to someone else. He was right. I want to be honest about the income this situation had consumed. Not to make this story about money, but because I believe the scale of it matters to anyone who recognizes themselves in it. $18,000 over 3 years represents, for a family living in a small cottage on the south side of Chicago, the accumulation of years of careful work. It is the difference between a house that stays exactly as it is and a house that gets better. It is Marcus's future. It is my own health appointments. Canceled and rescheduled and canceled again until my heart ran out of patience and made the decision for me. The word profit had never meant much in my life, but I was beginning to understand what its opposite had been costing me. The week before the birthday, I was on the bus coming back from a therapy appointment in Lincoln Park, and we passed the Mercedes-Benz dealership on Michigan Avenue at the exact moment a pearl white S-Class was being unloaded from a transport truck. Long, low, quiet in the way expensive things are quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of a different kind. I watched it through the bus window, and instead of doing what I had always done, filing beautiful things under not for me, I let myself want it. Fully, without apology, without the immediate counter-argument about practicality or presumption. I have worked for decades. I have given until my heart literally signaled its refusal to continue. I have every right to want a beautiful car in a pearl white color. Wanting beautiful things is not selfishness. Wanting beautiful things is evidence of believing you have a future worth planning for. We sent invitations. My sister, who I had been keeping at a careful distance because Brianna had spent years characterizing me to my own family as controlling, unstable, the source of all pain. My sister came because I called and said, for the first time, "I need you here." 3 neighbors from the block, Raymond's mother from Rockford, 2 of Marcus's school friends with their mothers, ordinary people, witnesses. Brianna was told there was a birthday party. She was given no special reason to prepare. The night before, I made the macaroni, golden on top, the way Marcus had requested it. While I stirred and assembled and watched the cheese melt the way it needed to melt, the fan spun in the living room and the summer heat sat heavy in every room of the cottage, and the Jesus picture in the hallway watched everything, the way it had always watched everything, without judgment, without hurry. I put on my cherry red housecoat and I felt alive. That was deliberate. That was mine. Raymond positioned the laptop on the kitchen counter, open, dark, angled where the screen would be visible from anywhere in the living room. We were ready. 11 people in my living room, and nobody was breathing. Let me describe this room to you the way I actually saw it, because I want you to understand what truth-telling looks like when it finally arrives after years of waiting. It does not look like a movie scene. It looks like this: a woman holding an unlit birthday lighter, a boy in the center of a room who does not yet know whether the day will be saved, and a laptop screen that contains 8 months of quiet, patient documentation. Mark is flushed and bright-eyed in the way children are when all the attention in a room belongs to them, and they haven't yet learned to feel undeserving of it. Raymond's mother near the bookshelf, her hand resting on the spine of that old Bible. My sister near the kitchen doorway, and when our eyes met, she gave me the small smile of someone who has been kept at a distance for too long and is finally inside the door again. 2 school mothers with paper plates. 3 neighbors who had been watching our family with the particular helpless awareness of people who sense something wrong but haven't been invited to name it. Brianna arrived late. I understand now that this was a choice. She came through the front door with her hair done, and her expression performing the familiar architecture. Suffering but present, difficult but here, a body made of endurance. She scanned the room and registered 11 people, a table with a child at the center, a celebration aimed at someone who was not her. Something cold and fast moved across her face. She covered it almost immediately. She crossed the room in 4 steps. She grabbed the edge of the cake board with both hands, and she threw it on the floor. Chocolate frosting and yellow sponge spread across the linoleum I had mopped that morning. 9 candles rolling separately in different directions. And Marcus, my son, 9 years old, made a sound. Small, singular, the specific sound of a child who does not understand why an adult would aim cruelty at him on the one day that was supposed to belong entirely to him. That sound. I will not forget that sound for as long as I live. Brianna turned to face the room with her arms folded and her chin elevated, and her face was assembling itself toward explanation, toward justification, toward the redirect she had executed 100 times inside these walls. Raymond's voice arrived in the room like a door closing. I've been waiting for the right moment. He opened the laptop. He clicked play. First clip, Brianna in the living room at 2 p.m. on a day she had told me she was too fatigued to leave her bed. On screen she was doing yoga. Full sequence, fluid, unhurried, smiling. Second clip, Brianna in the kitchen on the phone, speaking in her actual voice. Not the strained, careful register she used with me, but her real voice, easy and rapid and lit with genuine laughter, describing plans for a weekend I had not been told she was well enough to have. Clip after clip. Her moving quickly through the house, her speaking easily. Her carrying herself with the complete physical confidence of someone whose body is not under siege. Each followed within the hour by footage of her with me, moving slowly, speaking with effort, her face arranged into the expression of someone barely managing the weight of being alive. 27 times. Nobody spoke. When it ended, I looked at Brianna. She was looking at the screen. Then she looked at me. That footage has been running for 8 months, Brianna. Every single lie. And then, you thought I was too tired to fight. You were right, until I wasn't. She tried to cry. Of course she tried to cry. It was the only remaining tool in the only kit she had. She turned toward the room with tears forming and her face arranging itself into the familiar architecture of victimhood, and she said something about misunderstanding, about context, about suffering in ways that nobody could see. And the room did not respond. Raymond's mother set down her drink and looked at her granddaughter with the face of someone whose long-held suspicion has been confirmed, and who finds no satisfaction in it. My sister looked at me. And I need you to understand that look, because I had been waiting for it for 3 years without knowing I was waiting for it. She did not look at me with pity. She did not look at me with rescue in her eyes. She looked at me like I was someone she was proud of. One of the neighbors knelt down without a word and began picking pieces of cake up from the floor. A second one joined her. Then my sister. The room reorganized itself, not around the drama, but around my son. I crossed the room and crouched in front of Marcus. I looked him in the face and I said, "We are going to bake another cake. Right now, you and me. And it is going to be better than the first one." He looked at me. Something moved in his face. The specific shift from devastated to believing. Dignity is not reclaimed in a single grand gesture. But sometimes it starts with the decision to bake another cake. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is look at her child and mean it when she says, "We will make something better from what just broke." The week after Marcus's birthday, Brianna moved out. Not dramatically. No screaming departure. No slammed doors. No final confrontation. She left with 2 suitcases over the course of a Tuesday afternoon while I was at the library. Gone when I returned. The room empty in the way that rooms go empty when someone has chosen to remove themselves rather than been asked to leave. I walked down the hallway past the Jesus picture, pushed open the door to her room, and stood in the threshold. What I felt was not grief. The house was exhaling. There was no courtroom, no lawsuit, no formal accounting before a judge with a record. Brianna kept every dollar she had extracted from us, gone into whatever she had been spending it on for 3 years, not recoverable by any mechanism I had access to. The justice I received was not the external kind. The villain, as they say, kept the money. But I want to tell you what actually happened in the weeks that followed, because justice is sometimes quieter than we imagine it will be, and no less real for that. 11 people had watched 6 minutes of footage in my living room. Raymond's mother stopped the monthly wire transfers she had been sending Brianna. Transfers I had not known about until she called me herself, quietly, to apologize for not asking more questions sooner. 3 neighbors went home and talked to other neighbors. The careful story Brianna had been constructing about me, unstable, controlling, the source of all the family's pain, collapsed the moment it was placed beside evidence, because a narrative requires silence and isolation to survive, and the silence had ended. My sister came over that Thursday. She brought food, and she stayed 4 hours, and we talked the way we used to talk before 3 years of managed distance had eroded our closeness. I will not pretend that years close in one evening. But you begin where you can begin. We talked about our mother. We talked about being 41 years old, about what the back half of a life should look like when you finally get to choose its shape yourself. The rotary phone has not rung in the evenings since she left. That first week, the absence of the sound had a texture to it. Not silence exactly, but a kind of acoustic rest I had forgotten was possible in this kitchen. I went to the wall one morning early in August and put my hand on the receiver. Not to answer a call, not to brace for one, just resting my hand on the cool, ivory curve of it. This phone has meant different things to me across the years of living in this cottage. When I first moved in, it meant home, something rooted, something permanent. In the years of Brianna's campaigns, it meant dread, a low-frequency anticipation of demand arriving before I was ready to meet it. Now it means something else entirely, the right to choose. The right to reach out when I want to, rather than when I am required to. That phone is not a symbol of being stuck. It is a symbol of a woman who gets to decide. Denise became a genuine friend in the way friendships made after surviving something together tend to become fast, substantial, honest, in a way that years of ordinary social proximity sometimes never achieves. We meet at the diner on Thursday mornings now, the one on the corner with the fresh coffee and the counter stools that swivel loose. She introduced me to 2 women from her own circle who had their own versions of this story at different addresses. We formed something I call a book club. though it is mostly a lifeline wearing the clothes of a social activity. We bring books sometimes. We talk about what it means to rebuild a self after you have spent years giving it away. This was my rebirth, not a dramatic reinvention, but the slow building of a new tribe, a chosen family of people who are genuinely glad I am in the room. My therapist said something in our third session that I wrote down and have kept. You built your identity around a belief system that rewarded self-erasure. The work now is not to punish yourself for that. It's to learn what you actually want. Being asked what I actually want felt both urgent and completely disorienting. I am still answering that question, but I am answering it, which is more than I could have said a year ago. The savings account is growing. Steadily, not dramatically. This is not a story of sudden financial transformation. But with every deposit I make into an account that has only my name on it, I feel the specific satisfaction of income that stays where I put it. Of money that is mine in the way money should be mine, by right and by signature, not by exhaustion. I am making plans for the house near my sister. We have walked past it 3 times together, she and I. The one with the garden twice the size of mine and the east-facing porch, and the quality of morning light that comes through the windows like something that was waiting for us specifically. We have talked about it directly now, in the way you talk about real things. Growing old near each other. Having the daily proximity our family used to have before a 22-year-old's narrative eroded it. I still let myself picture the pearl-white Mercedes-Benz S-Class sometimes. Not as fantasy, as a statement of intent. I have earned the right to want beautiful things. Marcus and I baked the second cake on his birthday evening, stayed up later than any school night should allow, made it together with him insisting on layering it himself, more lopsided than the first one and infinitely better in every way that matters. We ate slices at the kitchen table, just the 3 of us, and Marcus announced with complete seriousness that it was the best birthday he had ever had. I know he meant the second half. I know exactly what he meant. Some things, after a very long time, are exactly that good. Summer has ended. I am telling you this from October, when the south side of Chicago has gone full autumn. The trees along the main strip have turned, the hardware store has rakes in the window, the diner on the corner has switched from iced coffee to hot without ceremony, the way practical people in a practical neighborhood manage transitions. Quietly, without performance, because the work continues. The fan has been put away in the back of the closet. The vegetable garden has been put to bed. I cut the last of the collard greens on a Sunday morning in September with my sister standing beside me, and we cooked them that afternoon with cornbread, and the meal was simple and warm, and mine in a way that meals have not felt mine for a very long time. Simplicity chosen freely is an entirely different experience from simplicity endured without choice. I know that now in my body, not only in my head. I want to talk to you about what I have learned. Not from a position of completion. I am 41 years old and I am still in the middle of this life, still making my way toward the east-facing porch and the garden I intend to grow. But as someone who has walked through a specific kind of experience and come out knowing things I did not know going in, things I believe you should have, whether or not your situation looks exactly like mine or only shares a corner of it. What happened in my home has a name. Therapists and legal professionals call it coercive control, the use of manufactured dependency through illness, helplessness, strategic suffering, to extract resources and maintain power over another person. It does not require physical force. It does not require a raised voice or a visible wound. It requires only a target who believes in reciprocity, hard enough to keep giving past the point where giving is returned. A person who loves completely and believes that love is a guarantee. I did not know my legal rights when this began. I did not know that financial coercion within family relationships can constitute civil fraud in many jurisdictions. I did not know that documented evidence, dates, dollar amounts, video footage, written records of specific words said in passing, carries legal weight in formal proceedings. I did not know that I could have consulted an attorney years before the situation reached the point where my heart sent in its notice by way of a kitchen floor. The attorney in Hyde Park, the one Denise's business card led me to, told me in our first meeting something I am passing directly to you now. Document everything, date everything, and understand that your records are the foundation of any future action you may choose to take. You do not have to decide what to do with the evidence the day you collect it, but you cannot go back and collect what you failed to document. The law says you have the right to protect your assets. The law says that coerced financial transfers within family relationships can be legally challenged. The law says you do not have to wait until something criminal occurs before you speak to a professional who can tell you where you stand. These rights belong to you, not to extreme cases, not to other people. To you, regardless of whether the person causing harm is a stranger or someone you have loved your entire life. This is not a rare situation. The World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 6 seniors worldwide suffers some form of abuse, and researchers note consistently that this number is an undercount because most people never report. They do not report because they love the person who is hurting them, because they have spent so long doubting themselves that they are not certain what they experienced qualifies, because the shame of being harmed inside your own family is enormous and quiet, and does not feel like it belongs in a conversation with an attorney. It counts. If someone is using your love for them as a mechanism to extract your money, your health, your time, or your dignity, it counts. Write it down. In Mexico, studies indicate that 1 in 3 seniors suffers some form of mistreatment within family structures, and the same silence that allows it to continue in Chicago allows it to continue there, and everywhere that family loyalty is weaponized against the people who believe in it most completely. These patterns do not begin in old age. They begin exactly the way mine did, gradually, over years, wearing the face of need, dressed in the language of love and sacrifice and reciprocity. By the time you recognize the shape of it, you are already inside it, which means the most protective thing you can do, for yourself and for other people in similar situations, is to end the silence before it ends you. When someone tells you that nobody asked you to do all this, write it down. Date it. Keep it somewhere safe. That line is evidence. Casual cruelty said in passing is still cruelty, and it leaves a mark, and a date on a notepad is the beginning of a record that may one day matter more than you expect. I am 41 years old. I am a woman who was being slowly dismantled by someone she loved and trusted, who found her way back through a health crisis, a hospital support group, a woman named Denise who had walked through the same fire and survived to slide a business card across a table, a rotary phone that has finally stopped ringing with demands, and a bank account on the main strip with a blue awning that carries only my name. I'm making my way toward the house near my sister. I have a book club that saves lives under the cover of discussing literature. I have neighbors who helped me pick chocolate frosting off a linoleum floor without being asked. I have a son who knows his mother fights for him. That is my fortune. I earned every single dollar of it. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? What city, what neighborhood, what room are you in? Leave it in the comments and tell me. If you had been standing in that living room when Raymond opened the laptop, what would you have done? If this story reached something in you, if you recognized yourself in any part of it, or if you know someone who is carrying this kind of weight in silence, like this video and share it with them. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, because there are more, and the people in them deserve to be heard, and you deserve to know that you are not alone in what you have seen and survived. I will be here. I am not going anywhere. Not anymore.